So let's talk about Gerald Ford. He holds a really unique place in American history, right? I mean, he's the only person to ever become vice president and president without being elected to either job. He was the guy who was supposed to heal a deeply divided nation, but his entire legacy got wrapped up in one single, incredibly controversial decision. And he didn't wait long to make it. Just 1 month into his presidency, the country is still just reeling from the whole Watergate scandal. And Ford does something that just sends an absolute shockwave across America. He grants a full, unconditional pardon to the man he just replaced, Richard Nixon. The political fallout was immediate, and it was brutal. I mean, just look at this. Overnight, Ford's approval rating, which was a pretty solid 71%, just plummeted. It dropped a staggering 22 points, all the way down to 49%. It was a complete political freefall. And the public was furious. This phrase, a corrupt bargain, was everywhere. The widespread belief was that some kind of secret deal had been made. Millions of Americans were absolutely convinced that Ford had promised Nixon a pardon in exchange for getting the presidency. And that accusation, it haunted him for his entire term. So, this really gets us to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? Why? Why would a president whose whole mission was to restore trust in government immediately turn around and make a move that just shattered it? Well, to figure that out, we actually need to rewind a bit and see the crazy story of how he even got to the White House to begin with. Here's the thing about Gerald Ford. He was never supposed to be president, not even close. He was a respected, longtime congressman, pretty happy with his career, who just happened to end up in the Oval Office because of a chain reaction of political crises that nobody saw coming. And this right here, this is what makes his story so absolutely unique. Just think about that for a second. Every other president in history has been on a national ballot, either for president or vice president. Not Ford. He was appointed to both jobs. It's a true historical anomaly, something that had never happened before and hasn't happened since. And this timeline just shows you how dizzyingly fast it all went down. In late 1973, he's just a congressman from Michigan. Then, boom, Vice President Agnew resigns because of his own corruption scandal. So Nixon picks Ford to be the new VP. Less than a year later, boom again. Watergate forces Nixon out. And just like that, Gerald Ford is the most powerful person on the planet. The very day he was sworn in, he said these now famous words. And his goal couldn't have been clearer. Calm the country down, bring back some integrity to the presidency, and help America finally move past the trauma of Watergate. It was exactly the message of healing a tired and cynical nation wanted to hear. But the whole Nixon situation wasn't the only fire he had to put out. Ford inherited a country that was facing a perfect storm of problems, both here at home and around the world. He was, quite literally, fighting fires on all fronts from day one. Probably the biggest challenge at home was the economy. It was trapped in this nasty thing called stagflation. And it's a brutal mix, You've got prices for everything soaring, more and more people are losing their jobs, and the whole economy just grinds to a halt. It was a total mess, and it landed right in Ford's lap. So what was his big solution? Well, he launched this public campaign called Whip Inflation Now, or WIN for short. The idea was to ask Americans to voluntarily pitch in by saving energy and spending less money. And while his heart was in the right place, it was widely seen as, well, a little simplistic for such a huge economic crisis, and it didn't really have much of an effect. Meanwhile, on the world stage, he was dealing with some huge moments. He signed the Helsinki Accords, a major agreement with the Soviet Union that was all about promoting human rights and dialing back Cold War tensions. He also had to preside over the very painful final end of the Vietnam War, and he stood firm against pressure to send troops back in. And in moments of crisis, like when an American ship was seized in the Mayaguez incident, he acted decisively to order a rescue. Okay, so with all that as a backdrop, this chaotic rise to power, the economic crisis, all these foreign policy challenges, let's circle back to that one decision that would come to define his entire presidency, the Nixon pardon. And here you can really see the two totally opposite ways of looking at it. For the public, it felt like a corrupt deal, a total betrayal of the idea that nobody, not even a president, is above the law. But for Ford, who, by the way, denied any kind of deal until the day he died, he saw it as a painful but necessary choice. He argued the country had to stop obsessing over Watergate so it could finally focus on all its other massive problems. And man, did he pay a political price. He knew it wouldn't be popular, of course, but the sheer size of the backlash was just a wound that his presidency really never healed from. For so many people, it just cemented that feeling of distrust. But here's the interesting twist. Over time, the historical view has really started to shift. With decades of hindsight, a lot of historians now argue that Ford's decision, even though it was political suicide, actually worked. It allowed the nation to finally turn the page on Watergate, and they see it as a courageous act, a president willing to sacrifice his own political career for what he thought was the good of the country. So, when all is said and done, how do we sum up this short, accidental, and unbelievably consequential presidency? Let's try and break down the final assessment. Ford's legacy is really a story of opposites, isn't it? On the plus side, he absolutely restored a sense of basic dignity and honesty to the White House. He was known for making principled decisions, not just popular ones. But on the other hand, that pardon crippled him politically. The economy was still a huge problem, and it all ended with him losing a very close election in 1976. Get this, he was only in office for 895 days. That's less than 2.5 years. But in that incredibly short and chaotic time, he did what he was brought in to do. He stabilized a nation that felt like it was on the brink. His ultimate legacy is one of providing integrity right when the country needed it the most. And that really leaves us with the big question, the one people still debate today. Was the Nixon pardon a corrupt bargain, a flat-out betrayal of justice? Or was it a brave, if painful, sacrifice that was absolutely necessary to help a wounded nation finally heal? That is the complicated legacy of America's accidental president.